All right, we're on question on this one right over here. We often hear people say, if you're teaching math in this country, there's no way you haven't heard of Salman Khan. That's a little bit surreal to me if that's true. How does your Khan Academy model work for less concrete subjects, say creative writing? Well, I think, it depends where you want to go on the spectrum into kind of subjective subjects. I think if we go into something like history, if there are lectures, and clearly there are history lectures, I've experienced many of them. We think once again that those shouldn't necessarily happen during class time. That those are better at the student's pace, at the student's time. And then if you get them out of the way using something like the Khan Academy, then class time can have a richer discussion. And on top of that, right now our exercise platform for the math, it generates math problems. It's harder for a computer to automatically generate a history question, or even frankly some types of math questions. And so what we think we can do is probably create a repository of questions that have appropriate data with them. How hard are they? How long does it take someone to do? How relevant are they to a specific topic? And so we can quiz people on topics like history and we don't have that yet, but that's something we would like to do in the not too far future, so that someone can, with the lectures, get a basic scaffold of their understanding of history through the videos, and they can get practice, so they make sure that they at least have the basic. They understand when World War I was, when World War II is, what's the difference between the League of Nations and the UN, and all of these type of things. And so when they go to class time, if they have access to a classroom, the classroom can be there for really rich discussion, and the teacher or the professor knows, because they're going to have data based on how people perform on the Khan Academy, what videos they watch, and how they perform on the questions. The teacher will know how prepared the class is for a richer discussion. For something like creative writing, and creative writing is, and I would put that probably with music composition and actually art, painting art, or studio art, things that are purely creative. I would say that if there are any lectures, so if right now in a creative writing class there are teachers giving basic lectures on just things to think about, we think that those things can be taken out of class time, that those can be done in a video. I'm probably not the right person to do it, but we'll be able to find people who can do those creative writing lectures. And also, even in creative writing, there is a basic skill set that you want to have in order to be a respectable creative writer. You basic grammar, vocabulary, doing a critical analysis of other writing. So some of that can be done in a video form factor. Everything we want to do is to enable the class time to be all about writing and getting feedback and getting assessment and critically analyzing other people's work. So it's it's activity-based work as opposed to just listening to a lecture. Creative writing, we don't have any other than, I can imagine there will probably be some videos eventually for maybe writing generally, grammar, vocabulary, some forms of, critical analysis. What I think we could do eventually for critical writing, and once again, this is completely on the drawing board and something we won't be able to get to for the near term, but I think you can do a model where Khan Academy has kind of creative writing projects, and students write creative, they write essays, and they write short stories, and they write poetry, and members of the Khan Academy community can give them feedback on how they did, and they can assess how good the writing was, and the students themselves will assess other people's writing. And I think if we can do something like that, once again, it'll become a tool where we can automate a lot of the overhead of trying to coordinate who's going to assess whom's work and all of the rest, and then you can once again use class time and with as much human interaction as possible. So I don't want to claim that we've solved that problem, but I suspect that there are ways. One thing I want to make clear in this interview is that we aren't married to a particular type of technology. We aren't saying that it has to be a black background with Sal scrawling in pastel colors and just talking about a subject. We aren't married to the idea that you have to have a knowledge map that's structured that way. Our number one goal is, how can we make a student's learning experience as productive as possible, and how can we make that that scarce time with the teacher, with the professor, and with the students' peers in that classroom, how can we make that as rich and productive as possible? And so that's what drives all of our thinking. So over time, I suspect in 10 years, I might not recognize a lot of what Khan Academy is, but I'll be very excited because it's going to be empowering a lot of those basic core principles. And we're always on the lookout for things that can kind of do that. So in something like creative writing, it's true. We don't offer something right now. History, we do offer a few videos, and we'll probably have a kind of a question bank in the not too far off future. But for creative writing, we want to explore that space, and we do eventually want to empower even the creative writing classrooms. Next question. You said that most educational software loses sight of the end user. What should the people in charge of purchasing these materials understand about them? It's a very simple idea. I would say if you are in a decision-making role, purchasing materials, and this is true whether you're in education or anything, don't just be impressed by the polish of what the salesperson tells you, or the fact that other districts are doing it, or when you flip through the book, it seems to have fancy graphics and it seems to be expensive and it seems to meet all of the state standards. I think the best thing that anyone can do is say, you know what, let me take out this book, or let me take out this piece of software and let me try to learn from it. Let me try to pick a subject that if you're the school's principal or the district superintendent or whoever you are, say, you know what, I'm a little rusty on systems of equations. Let me see if I can learn systems of equations from this book, and let me see if it's really that dramatically different than the older textbook, or if the software is dramatically different than the textbook. And that's really the best way to see if it's effective. In fact, I think that's true about assessing anything. I mean, I think all of us have experienced that sometimes even amongst teachers there could be a very flashy presentation, and not just teachers, videos even. There could be a very flashy presentation, and if you look at it superficially, you say, oh my God, this is going to be good instruction, but you're not actually trying to learn from, or that thing might not actually teach you. It might the more basic lecture or the more basic video oftentimes might do a better job at teaching you. So the real way to assess something is to actually try to learn from it. I'm not saying that flashy is necessarily bad. I'm just saying that flashy is not necessarily good. It's just a lot of us, it's easier to assess something very quickly saying, oh, look, that looks polished. That looks like there's a lot of money spent into it. It must be good. But the reality is try to actually learn from it, and you'll find that some of the more basic things can often do better. So I'd encourage, and I encourage anyone who's looking at anything like that is to question what their assumptions. Does a calculus textbook have to have 1,000 pages in it? Does it have to even be a hardcover book? Why don't you separate it into multiple chapters? I mean, all of these questions, I think, people, I mean, they all boil down to the basic principle that you should just try to learn from that content yourselves. And if you learn better from that content, and you find that content engaging, and you find it's something that you can engage with, it's likely that the students will be able to. And if you can't, and if it's just flashy and looks polished, then it's likely that the students won't be able to either. Next question. At the heart of the Khan Academy's philosophy is the importance of enabling students to learn at their own pace. What happens when these students enter the workforce? Do they work, perform surgery, try a case, analyze data, or even teach at their own pace? Yes. I think the learning at your own pace is exactly what happens in the real world. Every job I've been at, there was no 30-person classroom where I had to, where everyone was moved ahead at the same time. It was, first of all, it was a lot of learning on your own. You had to figure out what needs to be learned. No one was, there wasn't anyone holding your hand, and you had to learn at your own pace. You work at a firm, you have to kind of figure out what's important, and then you have to go, usually at most firms, figure out, ask the right questions from the right people, and then proceed at your own pace. And so you actually see that that is actually the reality in most fields. You learn from experience and from your own kind of inquiry, and that tends to happen at your own pace. No one forces you along until you really have and you don't force yourself along until you've mastered something. So yes, I actually think that's why so many students right now suffer when they go into the workforce, is that they're so used to being kind of shepherded along at kind of as a cohort, that all of a sudden when they're thrown into the work environment, and all of a sudden you have to decide when it's time to ask the boss for promotion. You have to decide when you think you're ready to go back to grad school. You have to decide when you think you're ready to start your own business. If some people struggle when they're not being told, now you're going to go to 12th grade, now you're going to go to college, and so I think that's an added benefit when you give people at a young age, if you give them control of their learning, if you make them self-directed, that's a skill that's just going to translate really well and really empower them once they enter the workforce.